Göbekli Tepe stands in southeastern Turkey, near the city of Şanlıurfa, on a remote rocky rise known as Potbelly Hill, a place that was once overlooked by researchers who walked across its surface without fully grasping the extraordinary wonders hidden below. Its name in Turkish translates to that very notion, a pot-belly-shaped mound. At first glance, there was little to suggest that an epochal discovery lay beneath the soil, just scattered fragments of limestone and the occasional exposed rock. Local farmers had thought the area might be an ancient cemetery, and the archaeological surveys that happened in the 1960s largely classified it as unremarkable. This assumption would dramatically change in the 1990s, when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt and his colleagues recognized that the stone fragments they were seeing were not incidental rubble, but were the remnants of a megalithic complex so old that it would rewrite humanity's understanding of the Neolithic period and the transition from mobile groups of hunter-gatherers to more settled societies on the cusp of agriculture. Göbekli Tepe has been called many things: the first temple on Earth, the earliest known place of organized ritual, and a site that possibly predates the wheel and pottery by thousands of years. Its significance stems not only from its extreme age, but also from the advanced organizational ability its builders displayed. The site's main structures revolve around circular or oval enclosures built of massive T-shaped pillars. These pillars are arranged like rings, some of which feature two central standing monoliths oriented toward each other. Many pillars stand 3 to 5 meters high and can weigh in the realm of 15 to 20 tons, carved meticulously out of local limestone quarries and then transported up the hill. They are not random slabs, but monumental megaliths shaped to have a T-form, as though abstractly representing the human form with broad shoulders. The surfaces bear carved images of animals: snakes, foxes, boars, cranes, vultures, lions, and some have stylized arms or belts incised onto them. The effect is almost surreal. These silent stones are arranged in circular patterns with designs that speak of something deep and symbolic, yet any textual record of what these images meant has been lost for 10 millennia. Indeed, unlike civilizations of historical eras, for which we have written documents or even elaborate inscriptions, Göbekli Tepe exists far beyond the reach of textual evidence. It belongs to the pre-pottery Neolithic, a time so distant that its stories can only be inferred through painstaking analysis of artifacts, animal bones, plant remains, and the layout of the site itself. Debates rage over whether these structures were temples in the way we might use that word today, or whether they were gathering places for festivals, communal events, or competitive feasting. Many archaeologists believe these circles were not ordinary houses, because the site lacks the domestic amenities of a typical settlement. The floors are made with polished lime surfaces, suggesting a care that went well beyond purely utilitarian ends. There is little evidence of hearths, ovens, or everyday chores in the main enclosures. Instead, large quantities of wild animal bones are found, representing gazelle, boar, and other game animals, hinting that some sort of feasting took place there. Stone tools such as flint blades and projectile points were also scattered about, reflecting a society skilled in hunting. Yet there is no clear demonstration that these animals or the grains found at the site were domesticated. Most specialists see the fauna as purely wild, meaning Göbekli Tepe was erected by a community still reliant on foraging for their food resources. This runs contrary to earlier assumptions in archaeology that only after farming was firmly established could a society invest labor in major construction projects. In older theoretical models, the so-called Neolithic Revolution marked the time when people were able to produce surplus food that would support specialized labor for communal tasks, like large-scale building. Göbekli Tepe, however, has prompted a re-evaluation of that assumption. The site dates to roughly 10,000 years before the present, making it some 6,000 years older than Stonehenge and thousands of years older than the pyramids of Egypt. Its existence implies that mobilizing the labor for monumental construction might have come first, with the shift to farming arriving afterward. Could it be that the impetus to come together and construct a grand ritual center spurred an increased need for consistent food supplies, encouraging intensification of cultivation and leading to the domestication of plants and animals? Or did people simply rely on an abundance of wild resources in that region, which might have been more plentiful after the last ice age, allowing them the opportunity to focus on monumental architecture during certain times of the year? These questions remain under debate, but the significance is that Göbekli Tepe complicates the idea that agriculture caused monumental building. Instead, the site raises the possibility that ceremonial or ritual building projects could have hastened the transition to more permanent forms of subsistence. The shape, arrangement, and imagery of the pillars tie strongly to the idea that they may represent gods, ancestors, or supernatural beings. Some researchers propose that each T-shaped pillar is an anthropomorphic figure, with the top crossbeam representing shoulders and the upright shaft symbolizing a body. Carvings of hands, belts, and loincloths enhance that impression. The animals carved onto many pillars seem menacing or powerful. Snarling lions, coiled snakes, deadly scorpions, tooth-bearing boars. It has led some to call it a stone zoo or a representation of a wild cosmos that these Neolithic people sought to engage with. However, no one can state conclusively what these images meant. They might be totemic animals, clan symbols, or guardians of a spiritual realm. Because there is such a broad time gap before the invention of writing, researchers are left to make educated guesses based on comparisons with other prehistoric societies and analogies drawn from more recent ethnographic studies of hunter-gatherers around the world. Yet no exact parallels exist, given the unique aspects of the pre-pottery Neolithic in the Fertile Crescent. Another fascinating aspect is how the site was filled in and buried intentionally. Each enclosure appears to have had a relatively brief period of use, perhaps a few decades or centuries, after which it was backfilled with rubble, stone chips, and refuse, then sealed off. New layers were built atop the older layers, suggesting a cyclical process of creation and closure. It is almost as if each generation or group decided that a certain ring was complete, performed a termination rite, and then created a new ring. Over time, Göbekli Tepe grew into a mound. While multiple enclosure circles have been excavated ground-penetrating radar, and other surveys hint that there may be dozens more still hidden. Some experts estimate that as little as 5 to 10% of the total site has been uncovered, leaving the possibility that still deeper or more distant enclosures lie waiting, possibly unveiling more secrets of its origin. Klaus Schmidt, who passed away in 2014, dedicated many years to Göbekli Tepe. His insight was pivotal in arguing that these structures were of a non-domestic, possibly sacred nature, reversing earlier perceptions that the place was unimportant. He described it as the world's oldest temple, which is often repeated in media and popular discussions. Although the exact term temple may imply structures reminiscent of Mesopotamian ziggurats or Egyptian temples built thousands of years later, the phrase has caught on because it highlights that this was likely a place of ritual significance. Schmidt believed that the site, built by hunter-gatherers, demonstrated that the impetus for monumental construction and complex social structures could arise without a fully agricultural economy. This viewpoint changed the timeline of complexity in human societies, pushing it back well into the 10th millennium BC. In recent years, new excavations at Göbekli Tepe's sister sites, such as Karahan Tepe, have reinforced the notion that there was a broader culture across the region. Some of these sites exhibit T-shaped pillars or similar megalithic architecture. Karahan Tepe, for instance, has remarkable stone carvings, including human faces and stylized pillars, and may date to a period contemporaneous with Göbekli Tepe. These stone hills, scattered across southeastern Turkey, illustrate that Göbekli Tepe was not an isolated phenomenon, but part of a network of communities along the foothills of the Taurus Mountains. One question archaeologists grapple with is how these early communities managed to transport and lift such enormous stones. Basic experiments demonstrate that large groups, even without draft animals or wheels, can shift 20-ton blocks if they work together, especially with the use of ropes, wooden sledges, and organized effort. Feasting events might have provided motivation. Communal ceremonies with feasts would build social cohesion, making these physically daunting tasks more feasible. This, in turn, might reinforce the theory that celebration and ritual were key drivers of these cultural changes. Another debate concerns the suggestion that the site may have been used year-round by a permanently settled group, or conversely, only seasonally by people who traveled from other areas of the Fertile Plains to gather for festivals. Archaeological evidence of tools for cutting wild grasses and cereals, along with remains of wild legumes and nuts, shows that foragers had a deep understanding of the local plants. Whether they planted them intentionally at that stage remains unclear. The bones of game animals also suggest repeated episodes of intense hunting, consistent with feasts. But was Göbekli Tepe a place of pilgrimage and communal ceremony for multiple bands, or was it maintained by a single local community? The data remains open to multiple interpretations. There is, however, some human skeletal material found there, fragments that might indicate special rites for certain individuals. Skulls appear to have been singled out, with at least a few examples displaying carvings or modifications. This ties into a broader phenomenon in pre-pottery Neolithic sites across the Near East, where plastered skulls are discovered at other settlements. Ancestor veneration and the special treatment of heads may have been widespread. One can imagine that at Göbekli Tepe, people with specialized roles, shamans, ritual leaders, or wise elders, might have orchestrated elaborate ceremonies, culminating in the offering of animals, the consumption of wild grains, and the recitation of communal mythology. Although everything about that is hypothetical, it speaks to the vast richness of interpretations we can draw from the limited material evidence of a site so astonishingly ancient. The age of Göbekli Tepe aligns with a global period of climate flux. The world was emerging from the last glacial maximum. Some scholars posit that environmental changes might have led to the blossoming of certain plants in the region and an abundance of game. People would have recognized that areas of the Fertile Crescent had reliable grasses and herds, facilitating larger gatherings. Over time, this could have paved the way for the domestication of wheat, barley, sheep and goats, slowly but surely transforming groups that built megalithic circles into early farming villages. Over hundreds of years, subsequent communities might have lost or replaced the original spiritual systems, but retained the impetus for communal effort, storytelling, and sophisticated construction techniques. One of the greatest uncertainties surrounding Göbekli Tepe is precisely what it meant to the people who raised the pillars. Our modern minds may interpret them as the earliest temples, but these circles could have been social spaces, places for exchange, or sites of cosmic alignment. Some researchers propose that the T-shaped pillars might represent mythical beings who formed the boundary between the human world and the realm of animal spirits, reflecting the significance of a cosmic order that viewed humans as intimately connected with other creatures. Others have suggested elaborate star maps or alignments, though these remain less convincing without clear evidence. Excavations continued after Schmidt's death, involving Turkish archaeologists and institutions from around the world. Interpretations evolve as new methods emerge, like advanced remote sensing, microwear analysis on flint tools, and multidisciplinary studies on the bones of animals and people. A single new find can sometimes flip an older hypothesis on its head, underscoring the dynamic nature of archaeological research. The UNESCO World Heritage designation in 2018 gave Göbekli Tepe added global recognition, prompting an influx of tourism. This attention has the positive effect of providing funding for preservation and ongoing studies, but it also raises questions about how to protect a site of such fragility. A large protective canopy has been installed to shield parts of the excavation from the elements. The challenge is that an unexcavated area may remain better protected underground, while excavation offers the promise of new discoveries. It is a balancing act that demands caution. As additional sites come to light in the surrounding region, a broader cultural horizon emerges. This area in the foothills near the Taurus Mountains was more than a single hill. It was a tapestry of communities experimenting with architecture, stone carving, and new forms of social organization. The impetus for these cultural innovations may have been spiritual, communal, or related to climate shifts. Perhaps all three played a role. This region and era now appear as vital chapters in humanity's prehistory, bridging the gap between earlier Paleolithic lifeways and the first large-scale agricultural civilizations that arose in Mesopotamia and beyond. The sheer mystery of Göbekli Tepe fascinates both scholars and the general public. Some have spun fantastic theories, associating the site with mythical lost civilizations or extraterrestrial visitors, ideas born out of frustration that so much is unknown. But the scientific approach urges us to focus on the data at hand: the architecture, the carvings, the remains of animals and tools, the layers of fill, and the radiocarbon dates. All these provide a genuine window into an era of remarkable complexity and creativity, even before domesticated wheat or pottery. Whether or not one calls it a temple, Göbekli Tepe is undoubtedly a locus of sophisticated planning. Stones that weigh many tons were cut and transported without metal tools, shaped into forms that conveyed meaning, and placed in a patterned arrangement. There had to be a consensus to accomplish this, to organize tasks, maintain a schedule, and coordinate manpower. Nothing about that is trivial, and it suggests leadership structures, traditions, or possibly revered specialists. The repeated burying of older structures and the erection of new ones over centuries make it clear that generations returned to this place, participated in something that transcended ordinary daily life, and felt compelled to keep its memory alive. At some point, however, these monuments were left behind. The site was deliberately filled in, and, in time, the people who once came to Göbekli Tepe either died out, moved on, or integrated into new cultural spheres. Agriculture took firm hold in the region, and permanent settlements expanded. Metallurgy, pottery, and written language would only appear millennia later. By the time empires rose in Mesopotamia, Göbekli Tepe lay forgotten beneath a mound of earth, waiting for its rediscovery. If we try to visualize Göbekli Tepe at its height, we might picture groups of people approaching the hill from surrounding valleys, coming from small camps or proto-villages with knowledge of wild cereals, skilled at tracking gazelles and wild boar. They gather at the site, sharing communal hunts, bring seeds and nuts collected from the hills, and begin a multi-day festival around the circles. The megalithic pillars loom around them, carved with the images of the animals that filled their myths. Torches might flicker, casting shadows across the sculptures. A sense of awe prevails. People feast, exchange stories, resolve disputes, or plan future hunts. Perhaps certain individuals recite epic traditions or guide ceremonies to honor ancestral spirits. The circle enclosures are like open-air shrines, bridging the mortal and mythic realms. It is a powerful scene, speculative but consistent with the clues these stone rings have offered us. Eventually, the event concludes. Some groups stay to restore the site or add fresh carvings to newly quarried pillars, while others depart, taking with them the memory of a shared moment. Over many seasons, new rings might be erected, or older ones dismantled and refilled, as the community's beliefs shift or as certain enclosures become saturated with ritual significance. Slowly, a mound forms. Centuries pass, and one day the site is finally and permanently abandoned. Descriptions of such rites and gatherings remain locked behind a barrier of time, but the magnitude of labor and artistry poured into Göbekli Tepe is enough to assert that it held a special place in the hearts of those who built it. In modern times, it continues to captivate the world, fueling discussions about what truly motivated humans to transition from nomadic foragers to more settled ways of living. Perhaps the impetus was not strictly about producing food surpluses. Perhaps it was about forging a collective identity, forming cohesive groups through shared rituals and experiences, and letting that sense of unity drive innovations like planting seeds intentionally or corralling wild animals for dependable meat supplies. That interplay of social and economic factors lies at the core of debates about how civilization began. Göbekli Tepe reveals that the mind of early humans could conceive of grand, symbolic architecture long before the mainstream narrative assumed such capabilities. It is a testament to human ingenuity and the importance of ideas in uniting people for common purposes. While we still debate the specifics, the principle stands: monumental architecture and the intangible forces of belief, whether animistic, spiritual, or proto-religious, likely entwined in ways that fostered the subsequent leaps in technology and social organization that characterized the Neolithic. The presence of other contemporary or near-contemporary sites in the region encourages archaeologists to keep searching for a bigger picture. There may be dozens of unknown localities waiting to be excavated in the hills of southeastern Turkey or the broader Fertile Crescent. Each excavation adds a new fragment to the puzzle, but Göbekli Tepe remains the emblem, the most dramatic proof of how complicated and inventive people of the pre-pottery Neolithic truly were. The steps to that complexity are often overlooked when people think of prehistory as a uniform stretch of primitive existence. Instead, we see that artistry, planning, and collaboration existed in robust forms many millennia before the usual markers of civilization. The transitions at Göbekli Tepe also give us insight into continuity and transformation. Elements of animism, shamanism, or ancestor worship may well have carried forward into later times, when newly formed agricultural communities produced more permanent temples and erected new types of standing stones or stelae. Subsequent civilizations in the Near East often placed great importance on monumental building as a communal and ritual act. Whether or not they retained any direct memory of Göbekli Tepe's significance, it is likely that the broader cultural impetus for symbolic expression and ritual performance continued in various guises, culminating in the formal temples and ziggurats of Mesopotamia and beyond. Archaeology uncovers how each generation reworks, repurposes, or buries what came before. Göbekli Tepe's repeated closure and layering underscores an ancient cyclical perspective on sacred space, a pattern that arises again at other sites. A ring is built, used, revered, and eventually abandoned. New rings replace the old. Sometimes the older enclosures might remain in memory, but over time they fade or transform. Centuries can pass, enough for people to forget precisely who constructed the earlier layers, yet the mound's sanctity endures. This cyclical dynamic may also reflect changes in leadership, shifts in beliefs, or transformations in climate that altered the availability of game and foraging resources. Consider the dynamic interplay between environmental factors and cultural innovation. As Ice Age climates gave way to a more temperate environment, new opportunities arose, but also new responsibilities. People discovered wild cereals that thrived in the region. They recognized the fertility of certain soils near abundant water sources. Some groups adopted the earliest forms of cultivation, making them less nomadic, while others remained highly mobile, traveling to rendezvous points like Göbekli Tepe to maintain social bonds, share news, and partake in large gatherings. The process of burying the monumental rings might have signaled a time of crisis or celebration, or perhaps a broader societal shift in which the group decided to reconfigure their communal identity. If powerful leaders or shamans passed away, or if a new set of beliefs emerged, the old circle could be symbolically sealed and a new one constructed. This cyclical pattern is reminiscent of many ethnographic contexts where ritual spaces are destroyed and remade to mark new cosmic eras or to signal that the living group is forging a fresh link with the supernatural. Eventually, the final circle was filled. The people either moved elsewhere or changed their practices so fundamentally that the place was no longer relevant to them. The site soon faded into memory. Over thousands of years, the mound blended into the landscape. Pastoralists grazed animals on its slopes, never suspecting that beneath the surface lay a marvel from the dawn of human monumental architecture. By the 20th century, minimal attention had been paid to the hill beyond cursory visits and routine surveys. It took a lucky series of events in the 1990s to bring Göbekli Tepe to global attention. Once recognized, the site became a magnet for archaeological inquiry and for the imagination of the wider public. Documentaries, magazine articles, and tourist visits followed. People responded with fascination, overshadowed only by the sense that, in these T-shaped pillars, we have found a key piece of the puzzle regarding human spiritual and social evolution. The possible existence of an intricate ideology or set of beliefs from that early date encourages speculation. Did the builders of Göbekli Tepe conceive of an afterlife or an entire pantheon of animal spirits? Did they see themselves as guardians of a cosmic balance, requiring periodic ritual gatherings? Were the animals carved on the pillars meant to protect or to represent totemic affiliations? Did individuals claim supernatural power through contact with these symbols? The evidence remains tantalizingly inconclusive, yet the question itself reaffirms how sophisticated their worldview must have been. At the same time, Göbekli Tepe's artistry challenges us to think beyond a simplistic image of cavemen. These were anatomically modern humans, our equals in cognition and creativity. They simply lived in a world without metals or advanced technology. Still, they mobilized resource, designed purposeful architecture, and carved elaborate bas-relief images in stone. That is a testament to mental and social complexity that does not fit the older stereotype of brutish foragers. Instead, it shows us how quickly humans can innovate when conditions allow. It also invites us to consider that many other sites of comparable significance might have existed but left no trace. Wood was commonly used, but it decays over millennia. In a sense, Göbekli Tepe's significance is magnified because stone endures. Had these communities built entirely in wood, the story would be lost. Instead, we get to peer directly into the deep past through the medium of carved monoliths that speak across 10,000 years of silence, demanding that we rethink the sequence and reasons behind major cultural shifts. One of the most important takeaways is that we should not underestimate the complexity of societies before written records. Large-scale organization, religious or otherwise, did not necessarily await the creation of hierarchical city-states. People can rally around intangible ideas, faith, myth, communal identity, or the shared desire to create a place that is set apart from ordinary life. Göbekli Tepe might stand as the greatest prehistoric monument, attesting to the power of the human imagination and the binding force of collective belief. Even the question of how many people it took to build the site is not simple. Estimates vary. Some have posited hundreds of laborers, while others suggest smaller, dedicated groups could have done it over extended periods if they had enough time and motivation. We do know from ethnographic and experimental archaeology that moving multi-ton stones with rope and wood is possible using surprisingly small teams, though it requires organizational skill. Once erected, these pillars stand as silent watchers, overshadowing the ephemeral presence of their makers. All the while, the environment continued to shift. Over centuries, the climate would trend toward conditions that facilitated the beginnings of domesticated wheat, barley, lentils, and chickpeas, fueling population growth and eventually leading to permanent villages that later gave way to complex societies. Göbekli Tepe, an astonishing outlier for so long, now appears less isolated as new sites are discovered, but it still looms large as the earliest known example of megalithic construction. If ever texts had been invented in those days, we might have an explicit explanation for the circles and the T-shaped pillars. We might read stories of primordial beings who emerged from rock, of guardian animals that required offerings, or of a cosmic cycle that demanded group participation in cyclical rites. Instead, we have to rely on the symbolic language of the carvings themselves. Though we can never be sure of the precise meaning, it is clear that these images had meaning. They were deliberately chosen and repeated: snakes, vultures, scorpions, boars, predators that commanded both fear and respect, cunning foxes, graceful cranes, each with a possible mythic resonance that we can only guess at. Physical aspects of the site also indicate a sense of place in the landscape. Göbekli Tepe occupies a vantage point with broad views of the horizon. Perhaps watchers on the hill could anticipate approaching herds or travelers. If it was a gathering place, sightlines to the surrounding terrain might have been symbolically important or simply practical. One can imagine fires burning atop the hill, visible from miles away at dusk, drawing people in. The interplay of the site's positioning with its function is another open question. Did they align any of the pillars astronomically or consider sunrise and sunset in certain seasons? Some researchers have tried to identify alignments, though these remain speculative. The site might have had more fundamental concerns: closeness to water sources, suitable bedrock for quarrying pillars, and so on. Ultimately, any cosmic alignment would need to be tested against more data. Regardless of the specifics, the entire region was vital to the emergence of the Neolithic. Whether Göbekli Tepe triggered the shift to farming or simply exemplifies the complex societies that flourished as the last ice age ended, it suggests that belief and ritual could be powerful catalysts. People's motivations to gather, feast, and express their cosmologies might have exceeded immediate survival. Through communal construction, they forged new social bonds and discovered fresh ways to exploit the land's bounty. The rest, as they say, is history, or in this case, prehistory. Göbekli Tepe's story is still unfolding as more enclosures and sister sites are uncovered. The best we can do is keep an open mind. Each new pillar or carving, each new analysis of animal bone or grain residue will refine our picture of these Stone Age communities. For now, the site stands as the crowning testament to the fact that humans, even in the absence of agriculture, were fully capable of advanced construction, nuanced Symbian symbolism, and intricate social organization. This alone is enough to earn Göbekli Tepe its place in the annals of archaeology. It remains an enduring puzzle, quietly suggesting that the wellspring of our creativity, our capacity for complex belief, and our drive to shape the environment go hand in hand with what it means to be human. Despite the many centuries that separate us from those early builders, the stone rings beckon to our imaginations, reminding us that every grand temple, cathedral, or monument in recorded history has roots and impulses stretching back to times and places we scarcely recognize. Perhaps one day, further excavations and insights from related sites will illuminate more fully the impetus behind Göbekli Tepe, clarifying whether it was indeed a purely ritual site or something more blended in purpose. Until then, the T-shaped monoliths endure as silent sentinels, their surfaces carved with images of beasts whose significance has slipped into oblivion. Their arrangement hinting at ceremonies we can almost picture but never entirely understand. And so the legacy of Göbekli Tepe endures in the collective mind of our present age, a testament to prehistoric artistry, an invitation to question our assumptions about the origins of civilization, and a call to remember that humans at the dawn of settled life were perhaps as enthralled by myth, community, and the power of a shared vision as we are today. Each excavated stone stirs a reminder that curiosity and wonder belong not just to the modern researcher, but extend back across uncountable generations. Göbekli Tepe shows us that at least some ancient communities found meaning in shaping the raw stone, in summoning power through images and alignments, and in deliberately burying their sacred circles when a new chapter beckoned. Herein lies an enduring truth. As soon as humans learned how to gather in larger numbers, we also learned how to dream. And that, in many ways, was the foundation of everything that would follow, from the earliest harvests to the grandest civilizations. Thus concludes this script, woven in a single narrative flow, containing no explicitly divided scenes or segments, aiming to give voice to the astonishing significance of Göbekli Tepe, the place that might have been a temple, a communal sanctuary, or a festival ground for our ancient forager ancestors 10 millennia ago, who gathered stones of enormous size and raised them toward the sky long before writing or metal, or the domestication of animals became part of human life.